Hello, everyone. The title of our panel is Socially and Economically Disadvantaged Women Studies in India and Nepal. The first presentation would be by Dr. Shourish Chakraborty. The title of his presentation is Impact of Workforce Programs on Household Fuelwood Usage. Shourish completed his PhD in agricultural economics from University of Florida. He is currently working as a postdoctoral scholar at the University of Florida's Southwest Florida Research and Education Center. His research focuses are in development, agriculture, and natural economics. So Shourish, if you're ready to go, I'll start the timer. Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Sreyasi. Thank you, everyone. It's great to present here in the conference. So let me share my slides. Okay. So my presentation today is on the impact of Workfare Programs, specifically the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme on household fuelwood usage. So now it doesn't specifically address the gender issue as such, but as we know that fuelwood usage or fuelwood collection, there is a significant amount of time spent by women and children for that activity, and I'm sure that there is a relationship between fuelwood usage and time use and the impact of workfare programs, as we will see later. So yeah, so workfare programs are implemented. They are similar to cash for work programs, but they are actually cash for work programs, and they are targeted towards specific people. So wages are paid in exchange for labor intensive work, and they can target the neediest and the most vulnerable household. And at the same time, they create opportunities for work in village level infrastructure, Then also at the same time, the rural poor in general, in most of the continents, are heavily dependent on common pool resources for sustenance. Now there is a big literature between on the relationship between household income and the type of fuel choice or the amount of fuel use or time use. In fact, Dr. Bohr has several papers on those. So now I won't be looking exactly at time use because I don't have the data on that. I'll be discussing the data that I've used. So, okay, so let me go forward. So there is evidence of impacts of cash transfer programs on deforestation. So a couple of papers are by Wilbur and Alex Garcia et al. For Mexico. Then also household fuelwood dependency on fuelwood for cooking has been around like 75% for some time. I'm not sure about the recent NSS numbers, but I'm more concerned about the numbers when the program was implemented. So like 73.4% in 2002 to 75.4% in 2006-07. And there is a positive relationship between income, fuelwood collection, and forest degradation. So MGNREGS or NREGS under the Act of NREGA, so it's the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. So it targets poverty reduction, provides yearly public works employment at specific minimum wages, which are determined at the state level and guarantees up to 100 days of employment to one person from each household. Usually these jobs are generated during the agricultural lean season when there are particularly no jobs. There is a large literature on the impact of NREGS on, for example, migration, women's health, and several other things. So the types of works undertaken are water conservation, irrigation works, afforestation, rural infrastructure, roads, and all. Then the program was implemented in 3 phases at the district level. so in this study, I'm concentrating on two phases. The first two phases, the first one of the treated districts are given in yellow, and the phase 2 districts are given in orange. So so 200 districts or the phase 1. So it's actually 179. Earlier there was so it's actually 200, but after taking into account the availability of data, so it's reduced to 179 in our analysis. So in February 2006, the program was implemented under phase 1, and then 130 more districts were added under the phase 2 in April 2007, and the remaining districts were added in April 2008. So impacts of household decision making on environment, I touched upon this earlier. There is a large literature on this, for example, on income and resource utilization. For example, Foster and Rosenvik found that with rising income, demand for forest products increase, which in turn incentivizes households to conserve forests. Then conversely, Alex Garcia found with the cash transfer program in Mexico, Oportunidades, there was actually an increase in deforestation because households shifted to land-intensive food, land-intensive products like, for example, beef and milk. There is literature on time use and fuel wood collection. For example, Barland in 2010 found that there was an increased firewood collection with rising income. However, when controlled for ownership of livestock or land assets, there was actually a decrease in firewood collection or fuel wood collection. Then Joshi and Bora in 2017 found that with increase in firewood collection, it dependent on, for example, household income, then education level of the household, then and also it dependent, and it also switching to modern fuels, it dependent a lot on the household level of income. So there is also relationship between poverty and migration. For example, Bhattacharya and Ines in 2008 found that with increased poverty, there is environmental decline associated with increased poverty on one hand, and as well as rural population on the other hand, and also rural net in-migration. So my objective is to analyze a household level mechanism through which NREGS implementation might lead to deforestation, and also estimate the impacts of NREGS on fuel wood consumption and the choice of obtaining fuel wood. So I've done the first one, the household level fuel consumption. So choice of obtaining choice of the cooking fuel is left. Choice of obtaining fuel wood is also done. So we can think about, this is just a flowchart that's showing what way households would be deciding, given that there is an agricultural lean season. Now, without NREGS being implemented, the household, so they are both poor households in our situation. We are considering just one household. Now, without NREGS implemented, the household level income could be marginally lower than when NREGS is implemented. Now, poorer households without work during agricultural season, they have decreased income and decreased consumption. Hence, they might have decreased consumption of fuel wood, as well as CALT refers to consumption of alternative fuels. It is possible. Now, again, given that the household is poor and there is lesser income during the agricultural lean season, it is possible that they decrease the consumption of alternative fuel sources, but increase the consumption of fuel wood during that point of time. Now, just as an NREGS beneficiary, they will be increasing household consumption and expenditure, and therefore both the fuel wood consumption as well as the alternative sources could increase, which is the third box here. And now it is also possible that with rising income, their fuel wood consumption actually decreases, which has been established in some of the literature that I discussed earlier, and they shift to alternative fuel sources which are more efficient and less time consuming to source, and therefore fuel wood consumption is kind of like an fuel wood is like an inferior good. So the methodology uses a simple difference in difference framework where Y refers to the unit of household for district at time T. Now this refers to the amount of fuel wood consumed, and then D is a dummy representing whether the household, whether the district is in NREGS or not. That is, whether the district is in the phase 1 of NREGS. Post refers to the post-treatment time period. And we are interested in alpha 3 here, which gives the average treatment effect on the treated. And we have household level controls, say for example, area of land that the household owns, the monthly per capita consumption expenditure, and others. And there are other district level variables, like for example, I guess rainfall and all. And we have the dummies for time and district. Now, we also have other specifications which interacts backwardness index ranks. That rank was created by Planning Commission based on several metrics such as proportion of backward or socially disadvantaged communities, and also we have interacted this with social groups or castes that the household belong to. For the mode of obtaining fuel wood, we have a very simple LPM, like linear probability model within DID. So the default dummy is free collection as compared to from market or from owned land. So I'll discuss only those results that are significant and which have passed the placebo test. So now placebo test would be when the program doesn't exist. Then what is the, we set up a fictitious post-treatment period and a fictitious treatment group, and then test whether there are other effects. So that's how I'm doing the placebo test, and I'm showing the results only for those that are robust, that have passed the placebo test and that are significant. Okay, so the data is from National Sample Survey. So they randomly select samples representative of the entire population. They have a very, I would say, systematic way of sampling. From each district, they sample villages, and from those villages, they sample population. They sample households from there. Now there are sub-rounds or quarterly data to reflect the effects of seasonality. So each NSS round is divided into 4 quarters. So in this, I'm using the NSS 61st round and 62nd round, the 8 quarters of those rounds as the pre-NREGS period. And the 63rd round as the 4 quarters from the 63rd round as the post-treatment period. Now there are some issues with the data which I'll quickly discuss. The real post-treatment period and the data post-treatment period do not exactly match. So this is a challenge of using NSS data because it doesn't exactly coincide with the, so it started in February, we saw February of 2006, but here it starts from, let me see, July to, so it's.
Shourish, you have two more minutes.
Okay, so it doesn't overlap completely. Then we have the quarterly instead of the monthly data. And also it doesn't recognize the gender of the fuel wood collector, which is, I would say for this session, it is a challenge because, I mean, gender would have been more, I guess it would have been important in this analysis, but it doesn't recognize the gender. So I'm looking for other data sources, if possible, explore other data sets, like for example, ISDS and all, but I haven't done that yet. So this is the impact of fuel wood consumption. Now, I did the analysis for rural households as well as urban households. So interestingly, I didn't find any, although I found significant effects in the rural households. I'm not presenting those because they didn't pass the placebo tests, unlike the urban households. So we see that in the urban household, so due to program implementation, there was a reduction in fuel wood use by 13.91 kilogram in the last 30 days. So that's how the question is asked. Now, it's kind of surprising that we are seeing an impact on the urban sample, because this would imply that there was spillover effects of that program on the urban sample. There are some studies which have kind of tried to find out the relationship. What could be the reasons that is driving this kind of relationship? We find that for business, for backwardness index rank quartile 4, which is the poorest districts, the effect is much higher. And also for social group OBC, it's also higher than just the simple model. In terms of the impact of, just one more minute. In terms of the impact of mode of fuel wood collection, we find this is a significant result, as well as it passes the placebo test. We find that for the rural sample, when we are comparing free collection to other modes of collection, there is a drop in the probability of collecting fuel wood with employment in NREGS, which actually there could be a time use angle to this, but given that there is no time use variables in this data set, there is an issue with that, but it can be further investigated. Yeah, so some of the possible pathways of NRGS on urban fuel wood consumption would be like, for example, urban consumers perhaps are dependent. No, urban fuel wood consumers are dependent on markets for fuel wood or charcoal. Then it is possible that price increases in fuel wood in the urban areas due to rural demand shifting out, and as well as there could be land clearing in rural areas due to public works and decreased fuel wood supply there. It is possible that, so although there is no significant change in fuel wood consumption in rural areas, it could have perhaps not affected the free collection of fuel wood, but it could have perhaps affected the market for fuel wood. Now we find, just a few more seconds, we found that the estimates are significant in richer districts. Richer districts perhaps because, actually the quartile 4 in that case means it's a richer district, so sorry about that. A richer district, perhaps the implementation of the program was done more efficiently in richer districts, and therefore we have significant estimates. Also, OBC households in urban areas are poorer and more dependent on fuel wood. Therefore, they are more likely to depend on markets for fuel wood in urban areas, unlike other households who are staying in the urban areas. They are perhaps dependent more on LPG, for example. And there is evidence of change in the mode of collection of fuel wood in rural areas. So the probability of collecting fuel wood for free decreased. Yeah, so there is possible evidence of time saved not collecting fuel wood by women. Yeah, so the limitations I discussed earlier. So the treatment period doesn't exactly coincide, and another issue is exact identification of the beneficiaries of NREGs. There are some questions on that, but it includes all governmental programs, not exactly NREGs. Now, future work is to analyze fuel choice, like what kind of fuels household choose. There has been some literature on this. Especially saw one yesterday by Dr. Bohra and some other authors. Then include connectivity to markets, because I think the results that we found here could be explained to some extent by proximity to markets. Then, most importantly, data on household time use is important, which I unfortunately don't have, but there could be some data sources like I would like to know more about, or talk about. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shourish. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your research. This was great. I think let's, if you want, stop your screen share, we can quickly move on to Bonita Sharma. Dr. Sharma is going to present her work on human economic and environmental capital influencing women health decision making in Nepal. So Dr. Sharma has been a close associate, and she's a wonderful researcher. Dr. Sharma is an assistant professor at the University of Texas at San Antonio, Department of Social Work in the College of Health, Community and Policy. Her research focuses on socioeconomic and environmental factors on women's empowerment and equity, women in global health issues such as HIV and violence, and inclusion and well-being within the natural and built environment context. Bonita, I don't know if you want to share your screen or, you could just go. Once you start, I can turn on the timer.
I can share the screen.
Oh, great, thanks.
Can see that. Thank you for the great question. Good morning, everybody from Texas. So my research for this presentation is on built economic and natural capital influence in health decision-making and gender-based outcomes for women in Nepal. So this is what I'm going to, this general outline, and it is a working study. So gender-based violence is strongly associated with global public health issues for women. Also lack of decision-making have been connected with violence, GBV, as well as women's physical and mental health. It is an existing and ever-growing problem in Nepal with many unreported gender-based violence cases go in the context of Nepal. So it's, as we know, deeply rooted in the patriarchal thinking system and power imbalances. The cultural aspect of Nepal is very much gendered, with women, women are not very open about discussing their gender-based violence experiences at even a local or community context, and nevertheless beyond at the national level. And so it has grave implications for many women in Nepal. This gender-based violence and lack of health decision-making are kind of interrelated, in that studies have found that those women who are likely to experience gender-based violence are also less likely to report or make decisions for better health for themselves. Both of these contexts often act as barrier for women to have also financial freedom, obtaining education, making better health decisions, as we said, land ownership, house ownership, etc. And literatures in the past have found that if women are educated, they are more likely to make a health decision making. They're likely to have more power in health decision making. Also, there's a meta-analysis by Buddha Thuki et al. They found that in Nepal, women with low education were unaware of birthing and reproductive services, warning signs during pregnancy complications, or support and transportation available for services. And on the other hand, they found that women who are educated are more likely to make better health decision making and consider many different options in the context. In terms of other factors, looking at, so I should have probably summarized. So the things that I'm looking at in this study are social built and natural capital in terms of mobile phone ownership, bank account, education, and land ownership. And so in the context of mobile phones, literatures have found that they help to remove gender-based barriers. They are more likely to reach out to their social networks. They also show that they make more appointments. They're more likely to also have access to telemedicine. Of course, in the context of Nepal, we still have very less saturation of mobile phone access, and on top of that, lesser use of smartphones for something like telemedicine. But research have otherwise shown that they are likely to support women in better health decision making and within the context of GBV as well. Next, looking at bank account and health decision making, research has found that bank account increased women's empowerment, which allowed for increased decision making in birthing options. They are more likely to use contraceptives and seek out antenatal services. Also, there's McDougall et al. Found that in high levels of women's involvement in financial institutions and bank ownership decrease levels of intimate partner violence. Next, looking at literature on land ownership, Allendorf in 2007 found that Nepalese women who own land were more likely to have a final say in household decisions and childcare, as land ownership also contributed to a healthy nutritional status of children and less likely of the children being severely underweight. Other studies found that higher percentage of land ownership, found that there seems to be a higher, compared for women over time. So this could be that there was a policy change in 2002 and 2007 for more affordability of land ownership in Nepal. Sorry about that. Why empowerment? Empowerment does not only benefit women, but as a society, it will benefit from women's empowerment, as we could see children's health improve, intergenerational health improve, and also I guess we can connect to the context of educating a woman educates, brings opportunities to the village or the community, right? Kind of that concept within the empowerment overview. So research shows that economically empowered women, those who have land and assets, are less likely to experience GBV as well. So in this study, I will use some of the economic builds in that and natural capital in terms of health decision making and GBV. I used the 2016 demographic health survey from Nepal. This is a more nationwide, more representative sample. As we know, this particular sample actually is much broader, but in the context of those who responded to gender-based violence, the sample size was 2,422, and it assesses women from the age of 15 to 49 years of age, or reproductive health age, considered by demographic health survey. And I conducted a multiple regression, and these constructs are, of course, relevant as we see from the literature aspect of things. Right? Some of the demographics, majority of the women who responded to the survey are between the age of 20 to 39, and almost 40% of the women reported as not being educated. 18% in have had primary education, secondary 30%, and higher education levels 11%. In this study, that should have been the sex of household head. Of course, 88% are male in their women reported as the male as the head of household, and 40% of the women were under the category reported to be poor in wealth index. So most of the, let's see, this is a re-summary of it. I'm going to kind of skip, except for a few ones. 70% reported they own telephone, but only 5% reported using mobile phones for financial transactions. More than half of the women did not have a bank account and nor had ability to make independent decisions about their health, earnings, and use of contraceptions. A majority did not own the land, so 88%, and were mainly self-employed or unemployed. And of course, 60% of the women report to be working in agricultural sector. And about 17% reported being victims of or survivor of gender-based violence. Looking at see, I'm going to, after the presentation, can I answer the questions? I see some of the questions there. Yeah, so running my multiple regression, some of the significant variables were owning a house or a land, sorry, alone or jointly, holding bank account, of course, so it has a negative, sorry, that should be better. And also highest education level. So increase in any of those, likely to decrease experience of violence by a husband or a partner. However, mobile phone was not significant. It could be because of less use of, or not having knowledge of, seeking for formal support on gender-based violence context. The model itself was 35% of the variants were explained the variables. So majority owning and land contributed significantly to the model, and so did the bank account. In conclusion, GBV and lack of health decision-making debilitate women's agency and power within relationships. More needs to be understood in these contexts, of course, and the nature of help seeking, perhaps it's quite different than just from the use of cell phone, and how does also banking, for example, financial empowerment, the pathway to how does that improve gender-based violence or health decision-making needs to be further explored. But yet policy, practice, and research must continue into these factors to support women and empower them within the context of sustainable development. And here are some of the
2 more minutes, just keeping in mind the time.
Okay, well, that's my presentation there. References. I'm going to, I guess, stop the presentation screen and look at the questions. Do we have
thanks, Bonita. I was wondering if we could take questions
later
after
on
the third presentation. Is that okay with you, Bonita?
Sure, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, maybe like I'm putting all the questions together of the 3 panels.
Thank you,
yeah.
Okay,
great. Thanks so much, Bonita. That was really great. I think the third presentation is by Dr. Barsha Poricha and Monalisa Mohanty. And the title of the presentation is Organizing Urban Poor Women Towards Sustainable Habitats, a case study of UDRC and CURE. I'll quickly go ahead and introduce them. And I was wondering, Barsha, I know there was some technical issues going on with sharing the screen. Do you think you can go ahead and share the screen in the meantime? Else I can do that. I have the presentation now.
Sreyasi, can you do it? I'm facing some kind of a technical issue. Today is not a great day for me. So there's some technical issue. So will you just share the screen?
I'm wondering if you can maybe share the entire presentation with me. Just email it me quickly. I think I got some.
I have done the entire thing. You've not received it?
No, I'm just receiving the screenshots, I think, of the first page.
I'm really sorry. I would have loved to show you the visuals, but I am unable to.
Because it's going to take me some time to get the screenshots together and then start sharing my. Just share the entire presentation. I'll go ahead and share.
No, I have shared it with you. I'm not too sure why it's not reaching you.
Oh, because the ones that I received were just the screenshots of the slides.
No, I have shared it thrice with you by now.
Oh, okay.
But I am not sure why it's.
Not sure what's going on.
Yeah, I am also not sure.
One option is you can just attach it to the chat here, the chat box here.
Okay.
I think that should work as well.
Okay. Okay, so let me just do it and see how I can do. How do I do that?
Okay, so let me quickly go ahead and introduce Barsha and Monalisa. Barsha is going to be the presenter. She's an urban and regional planner from CEPT, India, and with a PhD in human ecology from Ambedkar University in Delhi. Over the last 2 decades, she has been working on issues of civil society engagement and development, and her work particularly has been around engaging, developing, and designing inclusive and participatory planning and development mechanisms within urban governance processes. She works on issues of urban city planning, gender, youth development, and capacity building in an effort to influence and deepen policy discourse and strengthen citizen engagement and participatory processes in urban sector. And Monalisa has a master's in applied geography from with a specialization in regional and town planning from India. She has worked extensively in development sector for about 2 decades, beginning with research and development projects at Bhubaneswar in India in 1990. And yeah, she has some great, experience in working with UDRC. I think she's the director of the program there. Founded UDRC in 2008 with a clear mandate of setting up a platform for supporting urban poor in the Odisha state in India. So thanks so much, Barsha and Monalisa. And I'll go ahead and let me quickly check if. Were you able to?
It shows sent on my thing, and I'm really sorry. I would have liked to. I don't know how I show it to you all now.
Barsha, if you can try sharing your PPT, because we're running out of time, and in the meantime, the screenshots I have from you, I need to download them and share.
Okay, so what I'll do is
you can start.
I can start. Can you hear me? Yes. So thank you so much, HPRC, and I'm really sorry for all the technical challenges that one has been facing. But I guess it's a good start, because those exactly are the challenges that women of this country particularly go through every time we actually move on the path to empowerment. So it is not a simple process. And today's presentation, I would have been very happy to show you certain visuals, but I will take it orally as much as possible, is about this power. The two presentations before me, one, of course, particularly the one before by Bonita, spoke a lot about women's empowerment and how domestic violence is one of the critical factors of kind of pushing an obstacle to that movement of empowerment. So having said that, what I and Monalisa, of course, is there on the phone line, and she's in a remote location, but very quickly, because we just have 10 minutes. So very quickly, what we want to share is this entire power of having women's collectives. The idea of having women's collectives, and this particular thing that two organizations in particular, one that I belong to and one that Monalisa has founded, the UDRC and Center for Urban and Regional Excellence, we have for the last 20 odd years have been working on urban issues, and our work has been primarily around women's collectives. The idea is, if we have to speak about sustainable urban development, about inclusive processes, the only way to do it is trying to get women's collectives together. Now, this, as all of us understand, and I'm sure this particular group, which has been working on a lot of research, understands that getting together people, and particularly women who have various challenges in front of them, is one of the most intensive but a most exciting process towards this sustainable development. So I speak from a platform of working with urban informal poor. And we had certain visuals that we would have liked to show, but unfortunately there's some issue technologically that I'm unable to. But in case there are any questions, I'd be happy to, and I can actually share the PPT later. The idea is that UDRC started its work around late 1990s, and particularly in a state of Odisha. For some of you who are not familiar, this is a state at present, also it's in the news, because I think at about 6:30 or 7 tonight, there will be a landfall of not a super cyclone, but a cyclonic storm. And that is what is a critical factor of the kind of placement that Odisha has in the national map of the country. So it is faced by frequent disasters. There are super cyclones, there are floods, and frequently these are near small towns or urban settlements. And the first people who are at the brunt, who bear the brunt of these kind of issues, are people living in the informal settlements or slums. So UDRC's work over the last, I think they started in 1990s, has been around trying to get women's federations together, because it was understood that unless you actually, if you have to address some of these critical urban informality challenges, if you have to address issues of sustainable and safe habitats, you need to have women's groups together. So and one of the issues that was also coming up in the late 1990s and 2000s when UDRC was set up with this particular objective was also that eviction was a way of life. Okay. So the second, I'm really sorry, you will have to see it like this, but that is exactly the second slide. If you see, is a typical housing condition of slums without tenurial right. And the third one is that is what I'm just now speaking. Thank you so much, Sreyasi. The third slide is something, at least you'll be able to see some visuals, is the story of UDRC and how it came about. So they started with this Women's Federation. They started through an intensive capacity building of women, empowering women through various, do you have the next screenshot? We can go to that. So of how do you actually start, yes, how do you actually start getting people together and getting women together to start addressing some of these issues. So UDRC, because I said it was in Odisha, they worked through a very interesting 3-tier platform, which was called the National and the Odisha Alliance, which primarily meant that Mahila Millans, or the group of women or the network of women groups that they formed around saving and credit, and they slowly congregated to form the second level of federation, which was the Slum Dwellers Federation. And they were supported by NGOs like UDRC and Spark to take this way forward. The idea was to do, Shashi, we can move down. The idea was to work around sharing with the city officials, sharing with the state officials about the importance and significance of bottom-up processes towards inclusive cities. These are the women who actually will be a very strong part and component of your city process. The latest reports by some of the government data shows that women workforce is coming down, but the contribution of women to this particular economic growth of the city that we call it is very, very high. So if there are these two kind of situations, how is it that we bridge it together and actually work towards building these sustainable habitats? So the process is through partnerships and participation. I'm going very quickly because we just have 10 minutes. So the idea was through partnerships and participatory processes, and UDRC worked with a lot of city municipalities. They worked with Cuttack participatory slum mapping. We can just go down, they are just illustrations. The idea was to actually empower women to start mapping themselves. The first thing that you do in an urban area is slums were kind of invisible in the entire city. What do? You start mapping them, geolocating them, so that the city officials also understand that they are there. The slums are right there in front of you, and they need services. They need connection or leveling up with the integrated trunk infrastructure. They need safe dwelling units. So the first thing that UDRC worked with was around mapping. They worked with a whole lot of flagship programs of the Government of India, like the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, which in some ways has converted itself and right now runs as Amrut. Amrut is a program which talks about rejuvenation of urban towns. So it's a very interesting flagship program. So these were some of the very interesting programs that UDRC started with, and they worked in Puri. Sorry. But the entire idea was, as I mentioned, was trying to empower women, build their capacities to start negotiating with city governments only through the tool of evidence building. So mapping was a very critical tool of trying to build that evidence capacity building, so that when they actually start negotiating and talking to the city officials, they themselves know what is it that they're looking at. Sreyasi, a little down. You can just... Yeah, so these are examples of the work in Puri, consultations about people-led development, about how housing societies, how if you're looking at in situ housing or slum upgradation if you're looking at slum upgradation and you're looking at in situ upgradation, then this is the way to do it. This is how you actually start looking at land use plans, looking at city plans, where urban poor women become a very integral part of the entire decision making. Let's go down. Okay, so I will just skip this because we're already, I think, Sreyasi will soon tell me that there's just 2 minutes left. So we can just skip these. These were examples about how houses were being built by women's understanding, how design of houses got integrated because the women thought of their house in a certain format. And sorry. And they could start planning and playing a critical role in the housing design process in slum settlements of Bhubaneswar, Puri, Berhampur, and it goes on. If you go down.
I think that's all I have.
That's all you have? Okay.
Yeah.
Really sorry. So with this, I think then...
and you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So very quickly to just add to this, thank you so much, Sreyasi. To just add to this, I'll just mention that because I see Bonita has sent a little bit about the Nepal land reforms and all. So Odisha, after UDRC's work, started on a very interesting Odisha Livable Habitat Mission program called the Jaga Mission, in which the idea was that they would map, they would do drone mapping, they would identify all the slums across 100 plus odd cities and towns of Odisha, and they would actually move and build or work with slum dwellers to create a livable habitat for them. Very interesting mission, but it is under works. You must have heard it got the UN Habitat Award. It's got varied awards till now because of interesting design. But the kind of slum settlements that we are speaking about are immense and huge. And as Monalisa and I also keep on discussing, that the land is with revenue department, the idea of doing livable habitats is with the municipality. It is extremely difficult to bring in that coordination between the two, but efforts are going on. And at this moment of time, I think the status says that out of about 10 lakh or whatever percentage of population that we have who live in urban poverty in Odisha, about 1 lakh have been entitled with land entitlement rights. So not land rights, but land entitlement rights where they can stay on a piece of land and go forward. So I think that the idea is, I will not, because there were just 2 minutes, last 30 seconds is the idea that we wanted to bring to HPRC and this entire research is that one of the ways of trying to work around urban city planning issues is this entire thing about women's collectives, and how the capacity building of women's collectives is a very integral part and needs more importance and significance and reiteration. Okay, with that, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Barsha. And yeah, quickly we'll address the questions. I know we just have maybe 2 minutes for all the 3 panelists together. So I think question to Shourish by Dr. Bohra was, is the firewood bought or collected? How about the distance to forest in case of the collection? And the second question was, did you control for the availability of alternate resources? Shourish, just briefly.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So the sources of firewood collection are free collection, only purchase and from own land. So I haven't really controlled for the distance to forest in this study, but I would like to do that. So the data set is quite vast. I have to check if they have the locations of their villages are given. In that case, I can use the centroids of the villages to find how far they are from the nearest forest. I could also use I could also control for land use there. For example, how much proportion is forest cover or cropland or shrubland or savanna, like that. And the other question was if I control for alternative fuel sources. Actually, I haven't. So this one is the fuel that the household is using. I have to check if I could do that in that data set, in that I guess it's the consumption round. Also, yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Shourish. I think we'll quickly take one question for each panelist because we're running out of time. Bonita, question to you from Dr. Bohra as well was, do women have access to resource to legal protection? For example, retaining order against abusive husbands, etc. And is there any awareness program available for women regarding gender violence and their rights?
Well, that's a great question. Global studies have shown that about 1/3 of women seek out informal support system, and 1/4 of the women in a global context seek out formal services. And the statistics is very similar in Nepal as well. So there, it's very difficult for women to seek out formal support services. There are campaigns like Sati is one of the more prominent organizations in Nepal that puts out awareness on gender-based violence, but it's still a very difficult concept to put across. In one of my data study, I tried to ask a focus group of women about whether they, their husband hurt them or things like that. And the answer was always no, 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 no. And so we had to find different ways to even ask the question, such as, do they, pull your hair, or do they hit you when you don't bring, when you don't follow directions and things like that. So it's a very culturally, challenging concept. Yes, there are nonprofits that are trying to make awareness on this issue.
Thanks so much, Bonita. I really appreciate it. To Barsha, Monalisa, again, like Dr. Bohra wants to know, like, do you know if how the land prices were affected? Any take on that?
Monalisa, can you hear us? Do you want to come in, or do you want me to just do it? Okay, so I think she's on mute. So let me just take a quick take, because as Sreyasi said, time is limited and this demands, Mr. Bohra demands. Okay, Monalisa, you want to speak?
I couldn't hear the question. Can you?
About the land, the monetization of land. How has it reflected? How has it affected the land prices?
Oh, was that to me? I guess I think that was in reference to the land reform policies in Nepal. I don't know. That's a great question, Dr. Bohra. That did this redistribution impact land pricing is an interesting concept to follow through on. But a lot of the land reforms try to address I think there were several questions regarding this. 2002, 2006, when we had the peace accord and the 3-year treaty on land reforms were advocated for. A lot of the Nepal has what, 37% indigenous population, and women were advocated to be part of that policy process. It did slightly increase from 10% to 12%, but it's not a significant rise in women's land ownership to make that kind of a big impact, I think. So yeah, those are still, although the policies for women's rights in ownership and inheritance are there, actual practice of that, or women actually seeking these land ownerships and inheritance rights are very little. Because cultural barriers still put them at that lower level. And in terms of resources by government, I think there was a question in terms of supporting land ownership and health care GBV access. There are a lot of campaigns. There was a 16-day activism that were carried out in collaboration with ILO, I think, and a lot of campaign resources, but actual budgeting is still it's not clearly laid out in terms of supporting anti-GBV context. Thanks.
Thanks, Bonita. I think in both the presentations, land was a common link. Probably this question was for Barsha, but Bonita, nevertheless, you answered a very, interesting aspect. Barsha, if you could just send your reply in the chat, because we are really running out of time, that would be great. Thanks so much, everyone. And thanks for sharing your research. Great.
Thank you.